The maintenance tunnels beneath New Chrysalis Station hummed with the constant thrum of life support systems. Jackson wiped sweat from his brow as he completed another routine inspection, his weathered hands moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd spent 15 years keeping this floating city alive. The deeper sectors were always the worst, hot, cramped, and filled with the refuse that nobody wanted to think about. That's when he heard it. A soft whimper. It's barely audible over the mechanical chorus around him. Jackson froze, his scanner still beeping in his hand. The sound came again, weak, desperate, utterly out of place in this mechanical wasteland. He rounded a corner and stopped dead in his tracks. Huddled between two massive waste processors was the smallest Azarian child he'd ever seen. Her pale blue skin was mottled with bruises, her oversized eyes dim with exhaustion and fear. She couldn't have been more than 6 years old by human standards, though with Zirians it was always hard to tell. What shocked him most was her size. She was tiny even by their species standards. Her limbs stick-thin and her breathing shallow. "Hey there," Jackson whispered, kneeling down slowly. The child flinched away, pressing herself deeper into the narrow space. "It's okay. I won't hurt you." The girl's voice was barely a whisper. "Please, don't send me back to the void chambers." Jackson's blood ran cold. He knew about the void chambers disposal units where the Zirians eliminated what they considered genetic waste. The fact that this child even knew the term meant she'd been marked for termination. His mind raced. Zirians were methodical, logical to a fault. They didn't abandon children. They efficiently eliminated what they saw as defects. "But what's your name?" he asked gently. I don't have permission to use a name," she stammered. "They said I was Unitex 47, too small. Defective coding." The casual dehumanization, or rather, Dylenization, made Jackson's stomach churn. This wasn't just abandonment. This was systematic disposal of a living, breathing child whose only crime was being born different. "Well, I think you deserve a name," he said softly. "How about Kira?" It means light in an old Earth language. For the first time, something flickered in her enormous eye. Surprise, maybe even hope. The sound of approaching boots echoed through the tunnel. Zarian patrol guards, their voices cold and mechanical as they discussed search patterns, made a split-second decision that would change both their lives forever. He scooped Kira into his arms, alarmed at how light she was, and activated his maintenance override codes. Hidden panels slid open, revealing service corridors that only senior technicians knew about. As they disappeared into the maze of passages, Jackson felt Kira's tiny fingers grip his uniform with desperate strength. Behind them, the patrol guards continued their methodical search, their scanners sweeping empty spaces. They were looking for Unitex 47, a defective unit that had somehow escaped processing. They wouldn't stop until they found her. In the darkness of the service tunnels, Jackson held the trembling child and wondered what he'd gotten himself into. Harboring a Zarian reject wasn't just dangerous, it was a death sentence. Looking down at Kira's face, seeing the first spark of trust beginning to bloom in her eyes, he knew he couldn't abandon her to the void. The hunt had begun. It so had something else, a bond that would challenge everything the galaxy thought it knew about worth, genetics, and the true meaning of family. 3 days had passed since Jackson pulled Kira from the waste sector, and the station was buzzing with tension. Security sweeps had increased, and whispers of a contamination breach spread through the human quarters. Jackson knew they couldn't stay hidden in the service tunnels much longer. "I'm hungry," Kira whispered, her voice barely audible in the cramped maintenance shaft where they'd taken refuge. Her condition had improved slightly, the fear in her eyes had dulled to wariness, and she'd begun to trust Jackson enough to sleep. Curled against his shoulder, "I know, little light," he murmured, using the nickname that had somehow stuck. "We're going to see someone who might help us." Finn's black market operation existed in the gray spaces of New Chrysalis. Invisible, practically essential. The grizzled trader dealt in everything from rare metals to forged documentation. Operating from a hidden shop wedged between two legitimate businesses in the merchant quarter, when Jackson emerged from a concealed entrance with Kira in his arms, Finn's cybernetic eyeword, as it focused on them. "Jackson, you magnificent fool. You have any idea what kind of heat you've brought down on this station?" "She's just a child, Finn. She's a Zarian reject. Commander Voss has been tearing this place apart looking for her. The Zarian Council has issued what they're calling a retrieval directive." "Finn's organic," I narrowed. "They're not just asking for her back, jocks. They're demanding it." As if summoned by their conversation, the shop's proximity alarms chimed. Through the security feeds, they watched Commander Voss stride through the merchant quarter with a squad of station security there, scanners sweeping every doorway. Back room now. Finn activated his shop's emergency protocols, transforming the space into an apparently legitimate electronics repair facility. Jackson carried Kira through a hidden passage that led to a small chamber lined with sensor dampening materials. They waited in tense silence as boots thundered overhead. Through paper-thin walls, they heard Voss's voice. "We know someone's harboring the Zarian unit. When we find them, they'll face charges of theft of alien property and obstruction of diplomatic relations." Kira whimpered softly, and Jackson held her tighter. "Property," he whispered fiercely. "They call you property." After what felt like hours, the sounds faded. Finn appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. "They're gone, but they'll be back." Voss isn't just following orders. The Zarian delegation promised him a promotion if he recovers their genetic material intact. "We need to get deeper into the station," Jackson said. "The forgotten levels." Finn shook his head. "Those sections have been sealed for years. No life support, no power grids. It's a tomb down there. Better a tomb than letting them take her back to die." Kira looked up at both men, her large eyes moving between them. "I don't want to be trouble," she said quietly. "Maybe I should go back. Maybe they'll be quick." The casual acceptance of her own execution hit Jackson like a physical blow. "No, you're not trouble, Kira. You're a person. And persons don't get thrown away just because someone else thinks they're broken." Finn sighed, his mechanical components clicking as his systems ran through calculations. The old research levels. Section 127 through C12. They were abandoned after the mining accident 3 years ago. If you can restore basic life support. "I can jury-rig something," Jackson said immediately, at least temporarily. As they prepared to descend into the station's forgotten depths, Kira tugged on Jackson's sleeve. "Why are you doing this?" "Species and mine, ... We're not friends." Jackson knelt to meet her eyes. "Because when I look at you, I don't see a species. I don't see a defect. I see a little girl who deserves to live, to grow up, to choose her own future. That's worth fighting for." Above them, Commander Voss was already planning his next sweep. While in the Zarian diplomatic quarters, messages were being sent to the home world. The hunt was escalating, but in the darkness below, something precious was taking root. The radical idea that worth wasn't determined by genetics, but by the simple fact of being alive. The abandoned research levels felt like exploring the bones of a dead giant. Jackson's flashlight cut through the darkness as he led Kira deeper into Section C9, their footsteps echoing in chambers that hadn't heard voices in 3 years. Emergency. Lighting flickered sporadically, casting eerie shadows on walls lined with defunct equipment. "It's like a graveyard," Kira whispered, staying close to his side. "It's safe," Jackson assured her, though he wasn't entirely convinced. The mining accident that had sealed these levels was officially classified, but rumors spoke of experimental drilling that had gone catastrophically wrong. They'd been living in the abandoned sections for 2 weeks now. Jackson had managed to restore basic life support to 3 chambers, creating a small haven where Kira was finally beginning to thrive. She'd put on weight, her skin had regained some of its natural luminescence. Most importantly, she'd begun to laugh a sound, like silver chimes, that seemed to brighten even their dim surroundings. That's when they met Nyx, the rogue scientist. Emerged from the shadows like a ghost, her pale hair wild and her clothes a patchwork of stolen laboratory gear. "Interesting," she said, studying Kira with intense curiosity. "A Zarian child in the abandoned levels? That's either very brave or very foolish." Jackson stepped protectively in front of Kira, but the child peered around him with curious eyes. "Are you a scientist?" she asked. "I was, before I asked too many questions." Yeah. Nix's gaze fixed on Kira's hands, which were glowing faintly with bioluminescent patterns. "When did that start?" "A few days ago," Kira said, looking down at her palms in wonder. "They get bright when I'm happy or excited." "Bad?" Nix's expression shifted to something approaching awe. "My dear child, it's extraordinary. I've studied Zarian genetics for 20 years, and I've never seen natural bioluminescence in your species. Because it was bred out of them, came a cold voice from the chamber entrance. They turned to see Elder Thane, one of the highest-ranking members of the Zarian Council, flanked by 2 guards in full combat armor. His angular features were set in an expression of disgust as he surveyed their makeshift home. "Elder Thane," Nix breathed, "you're supposed to be dead. A convenient fiction. It allowed me to pursue ... necessary research." His multifaceted eyes fixed on Kira, who had instinctively moved behind Jackson. "Unitex 47, you've caused considerable inconvenience." "Her name is Kira," Jackson said firmly. "It has no name. Oh, it is defective genetic material that should have been processed weeks ago." Thane stepped forward, and Kira's bioluminescence flared, brighter, creating patterns that seemed almost like writing across her skin. Nix gasped. "Those aren't random patterns. That's the old language, the original Zarian script from before the genetic modifications." "On our owl." "You know it's not," Nix said, her voice gaining strength. "The genetic purification program didn't eliminate defects. It eliminated evolution. Children like Kira represent what the Zarian species was meant to become before you started playing God with their DNA." Kira's patterns grew more complex. Suddenly, the abandoned equipment around them began responding, screens flickering to life, systems humming with power. Oh, she was somehow interfacing with the technology through her bioluminescent displays. "She's not defective," Jackson realized. "She's advanced." Elder Thane's composure cracked. "Silence. The genetic protocols exist for a reason. Chaos must be controlled. Evolution must be guided. This aberration threatens everything we've built." "Everything you've built on lies," Nix countered. "How many children like her have you murdered because they didn't fit your narrow definition of perfection?" The chamber filled with tension as thick as the recycled air. Kira looked between the adults, her patterns shifting to deeper, more urgent hues. She was trying to communicate something, but none of them understood her emerging language, the voice of a species trying to remember what it had been before fear and control had shaped its destiny. Elder Thane raised a weapon, his decision made. The experiment ends here. But as he moved to fire, Kira's bioluminescence exploded into brilliant, complex cascades of light, and every piece of technology in the abandoned research level responded at once. They were no longer in a dead section of the station, they were in Kira's domain, and she was far from defenseless. The abandoned research level transformed into a symphony of light and sound as Kira's abilities fully manifested. Ancient mining equipment hummed to life, security systems activated, and data streams from experiments conducted years ago began flowing across every available screen. Elder Thane's guards stumbled backward, their weapons useless against technology that now served a 6-year-old girl. "Fascinating," Nix breathed, watching data cascade around them. "She's not just interfacing with the system, she's awakening them. This is quantum-level consciousness interaction." "Impossible," Thane snarled, but his weapon trembled in his grip. The genetic modifications eliminated such primitive abilities millennia ago. That's just it, Nick said. Pieces of the puzzle. Clicking together in her mind. They weren't primitive, they were advanced. The original Zarian species had evolved beyond your current limitations before the Council decided to control their development. Through the chaos of awakening machinery, Captain Rosa's voice crackled over the station's communication system. All personnel, we have a situation in the abandoned sectors. Unknown energy signatures are cascading through multiple levels. Jackson knelt beside Kira, who was glowing so brightly she seemed like a small star. Kira, can you understand me? Her eyes focused on his, and for a moment the light pattern stabilized. I can hear them, she whispered. All of them. The machines, the station systems, even the ships in dock, they're singing to me. This abomination must be stopped, Thane declared, raising his weapon again. But before he could fire, the chamber's main screen flickered to life, displaying archived research files that had been sealed for decades. Nyx read the data streaming past, her expression growing horrified. Project Genesis, she read aloud. Genetic modification protocols designed to eliminate evolutionary variants in the Zarian population. Terminated subjects 2.3 million individuals. Over the past century, she looked at Thane with revulsion. We've been committing genocide. We've been ensuring survival, Thane replied coldly. Uncontrolled evolution leads to chaos. The variants threatened our social order. They threatened your power, Jackson said, understanding flooding through him. Children like Kira represent what the Zarians could become beings. You don't need your rigid hierarchies because they can communicate directly with each other and with technology. Kira's patterns shifted again, and suddenly they could all hear, in a faint harmony underlying the mechanical sounds around them. It was beautiful and alien, a song that spoke of connection, understanding, and growth beyond the boundaries of flesh and metal. There are others, Kira said, her voice carrying harmonics it had never possessed before. I can feel them, hidden, scared, scattered across the galaxy. They're calling back. Elder Thane's guards looked at each other uncertainly as their communication. Equipment began receiving signals from across space, other voices. Other songs, other children, who had somehow survived the systematic extermination. You've lost, Nyx told Thane. The truth is spreading through every system Kira touches. Soon the entire galaxy will know what the Zarian Council has done. Thane's composure finally cracked completely, and I'll destroy this station and everyone on it rather than let your corruption spread. He activated a device on his wrist, and alarms began blaring throughout New Chrysalis. Captain Rosa's voice returned. Now urgent. This is a station-wide emergency. Explosive devices have been detected. In critical systems, all personnel to emergency stations. Jackson grabbed Kira's hand. Can you stop it? Her patterns shifted to urgent reds and golds as she extended her consciousness into the station's core systems. There are so many bombs, she whispered. The station wants to live. It's asking me to help. Around them, the abandoned research level became a war zone of competing technologies. Thane's destruction protocols battling against Kira's awakening of the station's own defensive systems. The outcome would determine not just their survival, but the future of an entire species that had forgotten its own potential, as explosions began echoing through distant sections of the station. Kira closed her eyes and let her light expand outward, carrying with it the hopes of millions of children who had died for being different, and the promise that evolution could not be stopped, only delayed. The battle for New Chrysalis Station raged across multiple dimensions, physical explosions tearing through corridors while digital warfare erupted in cyberspace. Kira stood at the center of it all, her small form blazing with bioluminescent patterns as she fought to save thousands of lives. I can feel them dying, she whispered, tears streaming down her glowing cheeks. The bombs are too fast. But even as Elder Thane's weapons tore through the station's infrastructure, something unexpected happened. Other children began responding. Too, Kira's call, not just Zarians, but young beings from a dozen species, all carrying genetic gifts that their societies had tried to suppress. Impossible, Thane breathed, watching his tactical displays fill with new signatures. They're all supposed to be dead. Life finds a way, Nix said, her equipment detecting quantum entanglement signatures across vast distances. They're linking. Consciousness, sharing processing power. Kira isn't fighting alone anymore. Through the station's communication system, Captain Rose's voice carried desperate updates. Evacuation pods launching from sections 7 through 12. Emergency bulkheads. Holding on levels 3 and 5. Unknown entities are somehow containing the explosions. In the merchant quarter, Finn watched in amazement as his black market technology began operating with impossible efficiency. Guided by small voices that whispered instructions in languages he'd never heard, children throughout the galaxy were lending their unique abilities to save people they'd never met. The turning point came when a new voice joined the chorus holder, stronger, carrying the weight of experience. Through the chaos emerged Zara, a young adult Zarian who had been living in hiding for years. Her own bioluminescent abilities finally free to shine. "Sister," she called to Kira across impossible distances, "you don't have to carry this alone." Zara Kira's patterns shifted to joyous gold as she recognized the mental signature. "I thought I was the only one. There are hundreds of us. Maybe thousands. We've been waiting for someone brave enough to sing the first note." Elder Thane watched his perfect order crumbling as the station's systems turned against his weapons. Children he'd ordered killed were now saving the lives of those who had rejected them. "This cannot be allowed," he snarled, raising his personal weapon toward Kira. But Jackson stepped between them, his maintenance tools somehow transformed into shields by the technological awakening around them. "She's not your property. She never was. She's an abomination that will destroy everything we've built." "She's evolution," Nix corrected. "She's what your species becomes when you stop being afraid of growth." The final confrontation came not with violence, but with truth. As Kira's network of hidden children spread their influence, the real history of the Zarian species began emerging from suppressed archives. The galaxy learned about Project Genesis, about the systematic murder of millions, about the councils, who had chosen stagnation over evolution. Marcus Chen, a human rights advocate who had been monitoring the situation, transmitted the evidence across every available channel. "The universe needs to see this," he declared. "Every species has children, who are different, special, evolved. If we let fear destroy them, we destroy our own futures." Elder Thane, faced with exposure and the failure of his bombs, made one final desperate choice. But as he moved to activate a quantum cascade that would destroy the entire system, Kira's light reached him not to harm, but to heal. Her patterns showed him visions of what the Zarian species could become. Beings of light and thought, connected across the stars, growing and exploring rather than controlling and fearing. For a moment, something ancient stirred in Thane's genetically. Modified consciousness, a memory of what his people had been before they chose fear over wonder. His weapon fell from nerveless fingers. "What have we done?" he whispered. The crisis passed, but its effects rippled outward. New Chrysalis became a sanctuary for gifted children of all species. Kira, no longer hiding her nature, helped establish networks of understanding between worlds. The void chambers were converted into learning centers where children could explore their abilities without fear. Jackson watched from the observation deck as Kira played with other rescued children, their laughter a harmony that seemed to make the stars themselves shine brighter. She had grown in the months since he found her, not just physically, but into something magnificent and strange. And hopeful. "Thank you," she said, appearing beside him with that silent way she'd developed. "For seeing me when everyone else saw only what I wasn't." "Thank you," he replied, "for showing us all what we could become." In the depths of space, the song continued, carried by children who had been called useless, defective, impossible. They were the future singing itself into existence, one light at a time, proving that evolution could not be stopped, only celebrated. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly as it should be.